Okay, this is a simple vase design that we're going to use some sticks to create. We also have some beautiful oriental lilies and some little gem magnolia. So we've got what I would class as a medium size vase, medium height vase, and it's approximately about 10 to 12 centimetres in diameter across. Of course, this design can be made in a smaller vase, in a larger vase. It would just require either less or more material depending upon the size. But it's what we class as the simple vase design because it's the type of arrangement that people, once they come to you and they'll say, I want my flowers at home to look like how the florist does it. And so they will come to you to ask you to do it. It's also a very popular design for what we would class as subscription-based flowers. So flowers that people will regularly order, hopefully via subscription, and they'll just have delivered to their house every week. So this is a perfect example for that. It's also applicable for businesses as well. So whether it's on a foyer, a desk, or any entry hall as well, it's really quite versatile. So there's a couple of, I guess, tricks you could say, not that I like to call them tricks because they're really techniques of how you can use less flowers but make the design look really large and striking and effective. We're also going to discuss how you can make them last longer as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that it can be achieved. Firstly, by using the foliage and the flowers, and then later the sticks. So foliage is something that's now really widely accepted and clients understand the benefits of it, adding it with flowers, but they're also willing to pay for it. Whereas in the past, a lot of consumers would just think, well, just add the foliage and that won't cost any extra. But as we know now, many different foliages can cost actually more per bunch than the flowers. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm removing the leaves from the base of the stems. So that's the leaves that are going to be within the water. Again, back to the basics as to why, and that's because we don't want those leaves creating bacteria in that water. I'm also stripping off any little stems that might be poking out from the side. Again, that's just to prevent any homes for bacteria to grow. So it's something that anything that can attach to. That's why clean stems like tulips and iris and freesia and those types of more of the winter spring flowers are very, very clean stems. Also the tropicals. And so they attract less bacteria because there's less places for it to attach itself to. And that's a beautiful big piece of magnolia there. I may end up cutting this down. I may work with it as it is. We'll see how it goes. Then we also have the oriental lilies. So to prepare these, again, I'm just removing any of the leaves that are lower down, going to be within this water, but also any that are damaged. So a lot of the leaves get quite damaged in transportation and also just the packaging as well. So they're packed quite tight. They get damaged, but that's not really what we're after anyway. It's all about the flower. So we just remove the foliage that's a little bit damaged, but also that's lower down. And so of course you can use your hands for stripping and removing the leaves, but I don't recommend it. A, for saving your hands, but also depending upon where the flowers and how they've been grown, they could have a lot of chemicals on them. So again, just protecting yourself. And for this oriental stem here, there's a bud or something that's been cut off. So it was possibly a bud that was damaged. So I'm just going to trim that so that it's not an ugly end that's coming off it. So just trim it so that it's less visible. because when you only have 5 stems of flowers in any arrangement, they're really going to stand out. So that's why it is good to use something that's big and bold when you're only using a few of something. So looking at the pieces of foliage that I have, so this is one really nice big piece, and I'm going to work with it. So cutting the stems on an angle, and I'm using the secateurs to cut these heavier stems of foliage. So we still cut them on an angle. And that beautiful large piece will go in. And then to counteract over the other side, I'm going to use another larger, the second largest piece. So on the opposite side. And I've also fed it through the other stem. So across the stems like so, because they're going to form almost like a cage or a grid for the flowers to sit in, and it'll just make the whole thing a lot more stable. Then these small stems of foliage I'm going to use on the same side of the second smallest stem, just so that it physically and visually has more of a chance to balance out. So we've still got one side that's visually heavier than the other, purely because of that one big piece. I may end up leaving it there and allowing it to be asymmetrical, or at the end I might decide, no, I'd really prefer it to be more evenly symmetrical from a balance point of view, and so I may trim some. But I always like to do that last because you can't put it back. And now looking at my stems of oriental lilies and deciding which one I would like to be the centre piece. And that's going to be this one because it has 3 flowers on the one stem, whereas all of the others have 2 flowers on one stem. So always look for the odd one out to go into the centre, or the straightest, or the longest, one or the other. Now, knowing where to cut the stem, it helps to just hold the stem up against the vase and thinking about where you want the flowers to, the height of the flowers to be, and then you can measure it to the vase. So that's actually looking really good right there. I don't want them sitting too far above the foliage so that they're disconnected. It's one arrangement. But what I also want is for them to be the star of the show, not the foliage. So they will sit slightly higher. The third reason is that then the flowers will have space to open. So the oriental lilies, as you can see, are in really tight bud form, and then they need room, which is space, to be able to open so that they don't open squashed. So that's the one in the centre. I'm going to use the Lazy Susan to just keep turning the vase and just evenly distribute the other lilies. A question to ask a client, if they're asking for this for their home, is their vase going into an open space that can be viewed from all the way around? If it's going on, especially like an entry hall or something like that, or if it's for a business, it might be going on to like a foyer desk, then really it's just going to be viewed mostly from one side. And so you want to put the bulk of the flowers on one side. Keeping in mind you want to get that balance right so that it doesn't topple forward. So the ones the lilies as they start to come around are going to be cut a little bit shorter and go into the vase on slightly more of an angle so we get that open outward flow. As you can see there. I've evenly distributed the oriental lilies. Yes, it's definitely asymmetrical because I still have this large piece of magnolia coming out to the side, but that's actually to my preference now. So if you like things to be super even and symmetrical though, that won't appeal to you. So the next design that I'll create will be even and symmetrical, and so you might prefer that one. Okay, so that's as simple as it can be. And now I'm going to take the lilies out and a little bit of the foliage, or actually I'm going to take all of the foliage out and add the sticks. So the sticks you can purchase in bundles like so from the suppliers. But don't be afraid to cut them yourself as well if you have them in your garden or maybe neighbouring gardens. Don't be afraid to ask people if you can trim for them during winter is obviously the best time to do it because some people are really appreciative that you'll do it for them and then you'll take it away. So don't be afraid to ask. So you definitely want to use the secateurs for cutting them. And again, as I add them to the vase, I'll be crisscrossing, making like a grid into the base. So it depends on the height that you've got to work with as to whether you need to cut the sticks down or not, and also the height of the vase as well, so that it's still in proportion. Now, knowing the space is also important as to how far you can come out with the sticks. If you need to keep it straighter and taller, sometimes it's from a safety perspective, so that we can't have the sticks poking people in the eyes. Then you can just bundle them together. So you could actually bundle it to keep them quite tight and in one area, and then add them in. That way they're just a little bit, or a lot more, controlled. But if you've got the space, it makes for a really amazing looking display. And I also just like the sticks on their own as well, just in a vase without water in between having anything in them. It can be quite striking. So at this point there's a couple of options. You can, if you don't want foliage or you don't have any foliage, you can actually just add the lilies as they are. So you can add them without foliage, and that can look really nice and incredibly clean. Even though you're using sticks, it's a really nice clean look, but it's also something that you can slightly see through. So that's an option, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to add some of that foliage. You can see what it's like as one large display with really only using a little amount of material. And I'm going to cut this beautiful big magnolia down slightly. That magnolia even has a flower on that one. It's beautiful. This one I think is going to be a little dangerous. I'm just going to take it out now. And now it's time for the lilies to go in. So the Lazy Susans are just really good at making it easy to turn the vases, but also reminding you to turn as well. It can be a process that's easy to get lost in a good way, but also just ending up focusing on one area rather than turning. And then all of a sudden you run out of flowers, but you haven't finished the design. But you can also turn it into a one-sided design. That's the simple vase design using magnolia, white orientals, and also some dried sticks.